board and also the chair of the Community Affairs Committee of the board, or in short, the CAC. We are here today basically to have an open and candid talk about burning issues, or they can be not burning, but still issues that are on our minds as a movement and the board has been working on. We usually do these events every other month. So this is a bi-monthly meeting. This was supposed to be in June, but we pushed it to July just because in June, the CAC hosted a special meeting with the candidates in the current board election process. So our next meeting will be in August as part of Wikimania, and next October and December, you're always welcome to follow us on Meta. Just write on Meta CAC and you'll get to the page. And for those of you who haven't joined us before to any of these calls, it's worth saying that the Wikimedia Foundation Board of Trustees is a body that hosts a group of elected and appointed volunteers. We oversee the Wikimedia Foundation's activities and ensure its accountability. We also try to strategize and guide the WMF about movement-related topics. We have different board committees, and the one that facilitates the call today, the CAC, works specifically to strengthen the partnerships between our different communities around the world and the Wikimedia Foundation, to improve the transparency of the board, and to make sure that the community needs and perspectives are represented when the foundation is making different decisions. These open calls and conversations with the Board of Trustees are part of making that happen. I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us today, both as speakers and of course you who are joining us either here in the Zoom room, watching us live on the YouTube stream, or simply watching the recording later. With us today are some of our trustees. They will actively participate in today's meeting and will introduce themselves as they speak. Also with us is Mariana Iskander, the Wikimedia Foundation CEO, and we have also several staff members of the Wikimedia Foundation, some who are here to support us with logistics and technical issues, others who will be sharing updates related to the topics that we will be discussing today. In terms of the agenda, you will be hearing updates on the last board meeting we just had, the Foundation's annual plan, the board election process, enterprise, movement strategy, regional hubs, and the recent publications of the Foundation's first human rights impact assessment. Now I'm going to hand it over to Elena Lappin, who is our lead movement communication specialist, to talk about how this call is going to work. So thank you everyone for joining. Elena, to you.
Thanks, Shani. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today's conversation with the trustees. This is amazing. I don't think I've ever seen this many people here in the Zoom room. So it is really wonderful to see so many people joining us directly in Zoom this time. Hi, Elena Lappin, based in cloudy summer San Francisco. I'll be helping facilitate the session today. Just to go through how it's going to work, we're going to start with some very short updates. Those updates will be about the Foundation's annual plan, board elections, and grants. And then we're going to move to some bigger updates. And those updates will be followed by Q&A. So the bigger updates that we'll cover under the agenda today will be Enterprise, Wikimedia Enterprise, the regional and thematic hubs, and human rights. And on those items, we're going to alternate between updates and Q&A. So we'll start with Wikimedia Enterprise update, and then go to a quick live Q&A with the audience about Wikimedia Enterprise. Then we'll move to hubs, give a quick update there, talk with the audience about hubs, and so on. We'll save the last 20 minutes of this call for open Q&A on anything that we weren't able to answer earlier, and questions on any other topics that we're not covering on today's agenda. I want to remind speakers, and I will remind myself now, to speak slowly and clearly throughout the call, because we do have Spanish and Portuguese interpretation happening today. Throughout the session, like we always do, you can ask questions whenever they occur to you in the YouTube chat if you are streaming on YouTube, or here in the Zoom chat. If you're here with us in the Zoom room, you're also able to ask questions live. If you want to just raise your hand in the chat, we can call on you and you can unmute and ask your question. We really encourage you to do that if you feel comfortable. We love hearing from you directly. As always, again, we've also received some questions submitted ahead of time. So we will be working in those questions as we go as well. And if we don't have time to answer all the questions that we get here today, we will be posting those answers on Meta, on the event Meta page. We're also taking notes during this session, and we'll post key points from this meeting, along with translations of those key points on the event Meta page after as well. This meeting is being recorded. It will be available on the YouTube link immediately after we finish, and also will be uploaded to Commons after the event. Finally, I do want to remind everyone that this event is covered by the Universal Code of Conduct. So we will take and respond to any questions you might have that are asked with openness, that are asked with civility. And now I will pass it back to Shani to facilitate our updates.
Thank you so much, Elena. First, I would like to invite our board chair, Natalia Timkiv, to give an update on our latest board meeting. Nat, to you.
Thank you. So my name is Natalia Timkiv, and I'm a Ukrainian Wikipedian. I have been serving on the board as a board chair since 2021. Originally, I'm from Ukraine, but currently I am a displaced person. So the most recent board meeting on June 23 was quite short. It was the online meeting. The main topic was to discuss and approve the annual plan, about which we are going to speak a bit later, of the Wikimedia Foundation. Also, we received updates about the Universal Code of Conduct and Environmental Sustainability Report, a bit complicated to pronounce for non-native speakers. And also we approved the working capital policy for the Wikimedia Foundation. I am going to pass it to Shani.
Thank you, Nat. Before we move to actually discuss the annual plan, it's worth maybe mentioning that both Nat and I serve as the board liaisons to the MCDC that many of you know of. And we were able to join the MCDC in Berlin as they met first for the first time, live in person, and worked with them. So that was a great opportunity. And in relation to the update that Nat just gave, that was also the first time that MCDC members, when were invited, the Movement Charter Drafting Committee, or in short, MCDC. Thank you, Vicky. And we were, for the first time, inviting MCDC members to our board meeting. So all in all, this is part of, again, being more transparent and more visible, and making sure that the work the board does is more visible to the rest of the community. So with that, and apropos what we do, I want to move to Mariana Iskander, our CEO, to give an update on the annual planning process.
Thank you, Shani. My name is Mariana Iskander. I'm the CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation. I will remember Elena's guidance to speak slowly and begin by thanking the interpreters who are allowing us to have this conversation in multiple languages. I wanted to briefly take you on the journey that we've been on in some ways together. I see many people here who I met before I formally started at the foundation as part of a listening tour in the later part of 2021. In January, I shared a letter with the movement identifying a set of priorities and a set of puzzles. Those informed our work in creating an annual planning process for the Wikimedia Foundation that tried to create more flexibility and responsiveness so that we can tend to issues without necessarily needing to wait for another plan if they are more urgent or require us to respond with, more rapidly. We shared a set of external trends that speak to the question of what the world needs from us now, and invited and received some very helpful input from volunteers. And we have focused as well on how to invest more in the movement and in our communities. The main driver of the Foundation's annual plan is to focus it much more on the movement strategy. It really is anchored in the pillars of knowledge as a service and knowledge equity. And while we continue with the current annual plan for this year, we've identified the need for more multi-year planning that looks ahead and ensures that we can think about our strategy more than just 1 year at a time. The headlines of the plan, which we shared, is a focus on our projects, including Wikimedia Commons and Wikidata, as well as a very specific focus on regions so that our collaborations with communities are not one size fits all. I want to particularly thank volunteers who have provided input and collaboration over the last few months. We tried very hard to ensure that the plan was on Wiki and could receive and engage in that way. We had about 12,000 page views of the plan, 4 times more than we had last year. 30 contributors who engaged on the talk page from across 8 different wikis, and that includes Arabic, Swedish, German Wikipedias, Wikimedia Commons, and Wikidata. I can see from the Zoom room that we have some of you who were among the 750 community members that participated in regional calls at the end of April that were supported in about 15 different languages. We'll continue to engage, including, we hope, space in some of the upcoming regional community events to provide more feedback in the months ahead. And you can continue to share questions, reflections, comments on the meta page, or reach out to me directly at any time. I'll put my email back in the chat, but it's miskander@wikimedia.org. Probably the most significant addition to the foundation is our new head of product and tech. And I want to hand over to Luis, our trustee, to tell you more about that exciting addition. Luis, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Mariana. I'm Luis Bencoremillo, a trustee and tech executive calling from rural São Paulo, Brazil today. The Board of Trustees and the Foundation leadership has been focused on the executive search for a Chief Product and Technology Officer as a top priority for the organization. We're proud to announce today that Selena Deckelman will be joining the Foundation starting August 1st. She has spent the last 9 years at Mozilla, recently serving as the head of Firefox, where she oversaw more than 400 people responsible for the product and technology functions. She has a long history of working in open source and has proven track record of successful and innovative approaches to fostering inclusion and empowerment through the use of technology. Personally, I thoroughly enjoyed my conversations with Selena, particularly her humbleness, servant leadership approach, and the persistent drive for results over long timeframes, which is required for the complex puzzles that we have ahead. We're thrilled to have her. Hope you'll help us welcome her when she joins in 2 weeks. With that, and also on the topic of leadership, I'll pass it back to Shani.
Thank you, Luis. And just wanted to say thank you again for Mariana. Just to wrap the annual planning process, it's maybe worth noting that this is one of the main things that the board worked on in recent months in reviewing and approving the Foundation's annual plan. And it's been such a pleasure to, first of all, see a new approach to the whole process and to see it tying back much closer to movement strategy. and just working with the foundation's leadership to set these priorities for the coming year. So thank you, Mariana, for the partnership and everyone who worked on this. This was a months-long process, and we're happy about the results. So thank you. And with that, we're moving to Vicky, who will give us an update on the elections.
Hi, my name is Victoria Doronina, or Wiki. I am a trustee originally from Belarus, but I am in Manchester, United Kingdom at the moment. I am a member of the CAC committee, and I'm on the election task force, and that's why I'm going to tell you about the ongoing board elections. So there were 12 candidates that, as a part of the process, the affiliates selected 15 questions for the candidates, and the candidates answered these questions on MetaWiki and Movement Strategy Forum. So you can see the questions and answers in both places. Representatives of affiliates are reviewing these answers, and they will be voting for the candidates. The voting ends tomorrow, and there will be a short list of 6 candidates. And these candidates will be voted by the community. So to help community deciding who they want to vote for, the candidates will make videos. I mean, the shortlisted candidates will make videos where they will answer 6 community selected questions, and links will be published on Meta. So because it will be community elections, I want to encourage everybody to vote in the elections, because I'm sure some of you look at us and think, who are these people and why they're trustees? We are here because the community voted for us. And if there are any questions about the elections, I would be happy to answer in chat or at the end of our conversation, if I know the answer. If I don't know the answer, then on Meta page. Thank you. And now I will hand over to Rosie and Veronica.
Well, thank you very much, Vicki. So hi, everyone. I'm Rosie Stevenson Goodnight, and I'm based in sunny, rural, northeastern California. I joined the Board of Trustees in 2021 after last summer's board election process. I'm a member of the board's Talent and Culture Committee and an alternate member of the Community Affairs Committee. As many of you know, the grants team launched a new grant strategy last year with the goal of building a more equitable, streamlined system. Since then, they've been working to evaluate the impact of the first round of grants given under the new strategy. And we wanted to invite them today to give an update on that. I'm going to pass this over now to Veronica, who's based in Nairobi, Kenya, and is a senior program officer with the grants team. Veronica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosie, and hello, everyone, and thank you for having the grants team here. So our first round of funding under the new grant strategy was launched in July 2021 and up to March 2022. And under this strategy, there were 2 main key things. We did implement regional funding committees and also launched 3 new funding programs. The goal overall, as Rosie mentioned, was that we wanted to have more equitable funding across the regions so that then we're able to work better with local context and decentralized decision-making. We did publish a report on how the first round of funding did go. And in terms of the funds themselves, we did find that the funds were overall distributed in line with our initial goal of more equitable distribution. although we recognize that we still have a long way to go. With only just that one round, we have already distributed more funds than the entire previous fiscal year, 2020-21. For the first time, we have also aggregated information that allows us to understand what applicants and grantee partners are working on in the programs they're choosing to focus on. We also gathered feedback about the process, allowing us to learn. And some of the things we did find is that overall, people feel that this is the right direction, even if we recognize again that there are some changes that need to happen in terms of the process and the tools. We recognize that we need to continue fostering a partnership, a mindset between the foundation, the regional committees, and the applicants, and that there is an opportunity for better alignment, which continues to be critical for the new grant strategy moving forward. Empathy with clear and open communication becomes a key part of this process, and especially towards fostering more partnership. We did also observe that there were regional differences in committees and applicants' perceptions. For instance, in the Middle East and Africa region and in the Latin America and Caribbean regions, there was a tendency to evaluate the processes within the new grant strategy more positively. Overall, members of the regional funding committees, some of them who are here, did feel that the process and the regional funding committees are autonomous, that they are empowered, and that they're satisfied with their role, and that they are able to work well together. And that the support and the role of the community resource team was appreciated, and this feedback is going to be taken into consideration as we work on knowing how we will expand these efforts even further. You can read more about our findings of the executive summary, and I've seen, I think Chris did add that to the link. And overall, from the findings, we did incorporate some of the feedback in the second round of funding, and we're going to apply the same process in the analysis of the full year, which we will be very pleased to share with you. As I conclude, one thing that I do want to point out is that we've had recent developments in the changes, and the reporting guidelines and processes are one of those changes. The grants process is moving towards a trust-based systems. Grantee partners can decide which metrics they want to report on. We want to make sure that grantee partners are measuring what is most meaningful to them and most impactful for them. So if you choose to be creative, we want you to be creative. That way you're again measuring what is useful for you to support your learning and for your work. We recognize that this is a mindset shift, and that there is a change in relationship, and we believe with time we will get there, and that overall we're moving in the right direction. And thank you for having the grants team, and looking forward to having your questions. And I'll pass it to Elena.
Thanks so much, Veronica. Yeah, so if you have any questions about any of those quick updates, feel free to ask in the chat. I see there are some questions that have been asked and answered in the chat pertaining to the elections. We can also make sure that we get to some of those questions at the end if we're not able to answer them in the chat. I want to transition now from the short updates to the larger agenda items. So we will be taking the next 3 items, with Q&A interspliced. So we're going to take enterprise and do a Q&A on that, hubs, short Q&A on that, human rights, short Q&A on that. So if you have any questions, start thinking, feel free to ask them in chat, or again, if you're here in the Zoom room, you can raise your hand and unmute and ask your questions during the Q&A for each topic. So yeah, with that, I will hand it over to Lorenzo to open the floor about Wikimedia Enterprise.
Thank you. I'm Lorenzo Losa. I'm a trustee from Italy, elected last summer in the previous round of elections. The Board of Trustees has been following closely the developments of the Wikimedia Enterprise. And Enterprise in June announced its first set of customers, the Internet Archive and Google, and it also launched a self-sign up system. These are big milestones, both for the project and for allowing people to reuse more easily all the knowledge which is on the Wikimedia projects. And I want to congratulate the team of Wikimedia Enterprise for that. I'll pass to Liam to share the full update and what it means for the projects and for the movement.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Hello, my name is Liam Wyatt, and I work on the enterprise team. I'm also in Italy. It is by chance that Lorenzo and I are the ones talking about this from Italy. It's not that Italy is the Wikimedia Enterprise hub, but maybe it should be. As he said, hopefully the concept of Wikimedia Enterprise is not a surprise or not new to anyone. There have been multiple rounds of community conversation and different levels of update and announcement over the last 18 months. But we wanted to make this extra announcement because it pays off on a lot of the promises that were made a year ago in terms of what are we doing, why are we doing it, how is it being done. But it would not necessarily be the case that for every future new individual customer will make a new press release or anything. So this is more of an announcement about the first, which is, as Lorenzo said, Google and the Internet Archive as the first customers. Notably, the Internet Archive is receiving the same access for free as a friend of the family, as a nonprofit organization with an affiliated mission to ours who can benefit from this service. The service being, of course, a high-speed, high-fidelity API, application programming interface, where you can, as a large organization, plug into every change that Wikimedia is producing and receive that information at high speed, high volume with all of the associated services that a commercial organization would normally expect from a data service that is needed for them to have the business confidence to use Wikimedia knowledge in their services for their customers, which we must acknowledge is an increasingly large proportion of our readers, people who are accessing Wikipedia beyond our own website. They are valid readers of Wikipedia too, and the other sister projects. And those extra services are things like a dedicated customer support, contractual agreements of service level accessibility, uptime, which cost a lot to run, and therefore is important that those services are not subsidized by donors, but by the companies making a commercial benefit themselves. We should also emphasize that the content is the same. This is freely licensed knowledge that is available to be used, including commercially, and always has been. The best metaphor for this is, that we use a lot, is this is a new fat pipe, but the water is the same. A large business, a large industry might need a special high volume water pipe, but in the town fountain, you can collect your water from the village pump for free. It's the same content. We published this update in a variety of places, but I can put the link to the full details in the chat here if someone could also paste that over into the YouTube channel. I think that's everything I can say without monologuing too long. I'll just read my notes again to see if there was anything I missed. I guess the self-sign-up system that Lorenzo referred to, this enables anyone to try the system itself, the API, for free. And there are, of course, Wikimedia access methods, including via the normal database dumps platform and through Wikimedia Cloud Services, if you have a Cloud Services account. The payment model, the commercial revenue model, is based on volume and speed of usage, which for most purposes, for most individuals, for bots, etc., is higher. The threshold for needing to pay is higher than what would be required or needed for most purposes, including academic research. But if there is a mission-aligned non-profit reason, such as the Internet Archive, for requiring high-speed, high-fidelity access to such an API, then that can be provided to you also for free. The purpose ultimately is to meet the two strategic recommendations in the movement strategy of improving the access to knowledge for downstream readers, and also to diversify the revenue model of the Wikimedia Foundation itself, as we acknowledge an increasing proportion of the readership is coming on mobile and is coming via third-party services who don't therefore see the edit button and don't see the donate banners. I think I'll leave it there. If there are any questions for the for the board who oversee this program, please put them in the chat of either Zoom or on the YouTube broadcast. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liam. So we will open the floor for the next number of minutes for any questions about Wikimedia Enterprise and about these recent updates from the project. I can kick it off with a pre-submitted question about Wikimedia Enterprise, which I think you touched on in your update, Liam, but just to clarify further. You talked about Google and the Internet Archive being the first two customers of Wikimedia Enterprise, and that Google is a paying customer. So then the question that follows is Google paying for Wikimedia content? And isn't that then, doesn't that not align with the values of the movement? So if you would like to clarify what exactly it is that Google is paying for, whether it's content or not.
Precisely. So yes, the content is the same. Ultimately, all the metadata is the same metadata that is available in a variety of sometimes quite obscure places across the Wikimedia universe of data sources, but put into one neat package for all of the Wikimedia sister projects and languages, except Commons, except Wikidata for the time being. What they are paying for is the high speed, high volume usage with one single access point, rather than needing to go across the various APIs, the various services, scraping database dumps to access that information, plus the contractual guarantee of uptime, notification of when there will be maintenance and so forth. This is an SLA, not an SLO. That is, it's not a best effort. We try and do as well as we can. We keep it up as much as possible, which is how Wikimedia websites run themselves. This is a contractual service level agreement. That is, if this stops working for 5 minutes or 1 hour or whatever, and we didn't tell you, we didn't agree in advance, there's a repayment. There is a contractual obligation there. And that's how large organizations require to maintain large businesses and lots of value downstream. They cannot afford to not have those kinds of contractual obligations, and why services like cloud hosting exist to provide that guarantee. I should also clarify that the different customers, paying, non-paying, non-profits, large, small, all receive the same information through this API, through this service, at the volume that they require. There are no exclusive contracts. There is no exclusive features. So this is important from a knowledge equity perspective. It is not like customer A can stop their competitor from receiving the exact same service in the future if customer B wants to do so. This means we hope that, particularly in the light of the European Union regulations on the digital services, it builds a level playing field for smaller organizations to be able to have the same access to services that larger organizations have had the ability, by throwing time, money, and effort from their staff and their large bank balances at Wikimedia to solve their services, their demands. Smaller organizations just have not had the time, the money, or the people to do that. And so we've discovered in our research a lot of companies wanting to use Wikimedia, knowing that they can use it legally because it is freely licensed, but not being able or willing to invest in it. So we hope that providing this commercial service for the services, not the content, it will actually help to increase the accessibility of Wikimedia content across many more platforms and increase the playing field for that access to smaller organizations rather than merely supporting the big boys. I hope that answers the question about what are they paying for.
Thanks, Liam. I think it answered the question clearly, and it has generated a number of follow-up questions. So I will start with a follow-up question in the YouTube chat that's just asking, what kind of uptime is there in the service level agreement with Google?
I don't know specifically. Very small, like as in very high uptime. I can't say specifically to a number of minutes per month. I suspect the actual amount of uptime that the Wikimedia Foundation normal APIs and normal site reliability engineers obtain is sufficient, is the same equivalent that is required by these contractual agreements. The difference is the contractual obligation to do so. It's not, and I should emphasize, this is not about saying the existing service is bad. The existing service is great. The difference is the contractual obligation and the recompense if we do not meet that obligation. It's about the legal contractual requirements rather than merely the fact that our services are extremely reliable already.
Thank you. And then a follow-up question here in the Zoom chat. Is there a board resolution for this year's planned income and expenses around Wikimedia Enterprise?
I think I can reply to this. The board has unexpected income and expense, of course, for Wikimedia Enterprise. However, it's first, it is not really precise because honestly, we don't know what will happen. I mean, the expense is probably more or less foreseeable, but the income depends on whether you sign a contract. And since currently we are working on a small number of large customers, that's clearly very variable. Those estimates are, however, not public, not because we don't want the community to know, but because we don't want potential customers to know, because I mean, in a contractual relationship, if you are saying upfront what is your plans for the next year, yeah, you are generally in a weaker position to negotiate, and yeah, we don't want to get there. And of course, Liam has also posted a link in the chat for another important piece, which is a general board solution for the income of the Wikimedia Enterprise, stating that we are not going to have more than 30% of the Wikimedia Foundation income coming from enterprise. This is meant to make sure that the bulk of our income is not linked to the specific revenue, so to keep our independence. And it's also make also sense from a tax perspective. In any case, we will not be anywhere near 30% in the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Lorenzo. I know we need to move to the next item, but Liam, just a very quick question, either for you or for Lorenzo in the chat. I believe I'm understanding the question correctly. It asks, are there a contract with volunteers? I think what that means is, do volunteers need some sort of contract to be able to use the service? I could be misunderstanding. So Adil, if I'm misunderstanding the question.
So I will post a link into the chat there, if that is indeed the question. The community can access this service for free anywhere themselves. There is, here we go. This is from our FAQ. There are 3 methods of accessing the content itself. Already, database dumps, cloud services. Anyone can also sign up to the actual system itself, which requires a password and a login. It's its own special system, which then means you can become a commercial user if you want, but you don't have to. If you don't want to actually provide a login and password to the system, you can just take the database dump itself or go through your existing MediaWiki account on cloud services. If you're referring to contracts for the employees, they're all Wikimedia Foundation employees, such as myself. It is not a spin-off or a separate nonprofit organization. There is a legal structure called an LLC, which is about American tax law and contract law, but it's part of the Wikimedia Foundation. And if your question refers to how does this affect volunteers in terms of editing and being a Wikimedian, it doesn't at all. This is a read API, not a write API. It provides no access to downstream reusers to edit or introduce content into Wikimedia. And so there is no extra contractual or copyright obligations or association for Wikimedia editors with those reusers of content. We should remember that many large companies, including Google and including the Internet Archive, are already using Wikimedia content in their systems today. And so this changes nothing in terms of the legal relationship of how Wikimedia content is used and how copyright, how volunteers are attributed is related to that. We hope over time that this smoother method of accessing the content actually increases the ability of downstream users like search engines to consistently attribute where they got it from, which has been a concern of the movement for a long time.
Thank you so much for those very comprehensive answers. With that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is regional and thematic hubs. So I want to give the floor to Nat and Carl to talk a little bit about the updates about the hubs, and then we will do a quick Q&A. In the same way, we'll do a quick Q&A for this topic as well. Go ahead, Nat.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce myself again in case somebody forgot. So I'm the chair of the board of the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm also the liaison to the Mcdc, Movement Untitled Chapter community. And the conversations about hubs, which has been happening recently a lot, regional and thematic hubs, kind of like one of the major outcomes coming directly from the movement strategy recommendations. Hubs are envisioned as entities that will support multiple communities and organizations, which would be whose work can be grouped by regions or by topics, whatever it makes sense. And they are also envisioned as entities that will fill several roles for the communities that they would support, like maybe legal support, resource allocation, capacity building, and some other things. And they are believed to be important for making local decisions, for local decision making, for cross-community collaboration, and that's of course all more coming from the recommendations, a bit more theoretical. how they're going to be working out in practice, and what are the challenges, and what are the updates. I'm going to pass the word to Karel to update us about these things.
Dziękuję, Nat. Hello. My name is Karel Vaidla. I'm working with Wikimedia Foundation, and in this context, facilitating the process of the hubs. I have created a brief handout deck to support the presentation. You can browse it at your own speed. There are speaker notes with links to the materials I'm touching upon, because a lot is packed into the presentation. And thank you so much, Chris, who is today our magician, hopefully taking it also to the YouTube stream. So the key update regarding the hubs is that in beginning of June 2022, we published minimum piloting criteria for regional and thematic hubs. And then at the end of June, more precisely 24th to 26th of June, we hosted 3 online events that focused on discussing the hubs. And overall at these events, we had 68 individuals joining from very diverse backgrounds. We had a really good representation of Africa and Europe, for example, but main regions in the movement were represented. We lacked representation from South Asia and Central Asia only. And as we discussed the piloting criteria, we came back to the movement strategy recommendations and also the principles. And one of the things that was emphasized across all the 3 different calls with different participants was a principle of subsidiarity. And basically stating that implementing the recommendation around the hubs is our opportunity to actually implement the principle of subsidiarity and self-management. And so it was made clear that people want to have their say regarding what the hubs will need to be, and it needs to happen in context and all these things. At the same time, it was not really clear how then some of the issues will be tackled that are usually tackled via central coordination. And this is an open discussion item for us as we move forward. But overall, it is clear that there is an expectation that the communities would be the ones defining what the hubs would look like in their context. The expectation is that in this work, they will be supported. And the question is like how also the criteria will be supporting that work. And overall, there seemed to be an agreement that the criteria would help to bring clarity into the work on the hubs and understanding what the regional and thematic hubs need to be working on and what they need to be documenting and reporting out. So there is a movement level accountability. So we are building the hubs for a whole movement, and we need to ensure that there is visibility into what they're doing. There were concerns raised regarding the wording of using the word piloting, especially because many regional collaboratives have been around for 10 years. And there was even a feeling of certain dismissiveness that why are you now saying that we are starting to pilot the hubs? The key point there is that what we are trying to do here is bring intentionality and structure into the process. So far these collaboratives have been really organic, informal, and they, at some places, they have reached certain capacity. And this is also the reason why the recommendation was put forward in the movement strategy process. But there needs to be a certain next step that will help to support the regional and thematic collaboration. And this next step is bringing certain structural support and awareness into the work that we are doing. And the first step in providing that clarity and structure is the criteria. Regarding the criteria themselves, I will also post a link to criteria in the chat. The key feedback was that for piloting, they seem to be too extensive, but there are 14 of them. And probably there are essential ones. And this was part of the work that we tried to do during the event. We tried to get to the really essential minimal criteria. And overall, the good news is that across the 3 different calls, we had quite good alignment. So we had 5 criteria that really emerged as a core criteria. Regarding the rest, it was said that maybe we should look at these criteria rather as guidelines. So they would not stop any ongoing work. They would not stop organic growth of regional and thematic collaboratives, but rather they function as a guideline for good practice around the regional thematic hubs. So this is something that we need to explore further and to understand what it means in practice. Regarding the next steps, there is a certain alignment, and we will be working also on the feedback that we have received on Meta over the past 6 weeks. And based on that, we are trying to build a next version of piloting criteria, because the current proposal, it was a first draft, so there is room for improvement. And then what we are also trying to do is create a bit of a space for open questions to discuss what actually implementation of subsidiarity principle means in practice and in relation to the hub work. Also understanding what does a movement accept from hub pilots in terms of monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and how that can be beneficial for the hubs themselves, especially as a pilot. So learning is a key word in piloting. We need to figure that part out. And also we need to have a constructive discussion regarding about how do hub pilots access and acquire support. And this is especially important for ensuring equity in the process. I'm also, to end the presentation, posting a link of a full event report. So this is a bit of an Easter egg. We already have it up on Meta. So the ones who want to dig in the data and have more rich content, you can do that. You can browse it. You can already ask questions on the discussion page. But I'm stopping the presentation here to hear the questions from the audience. Full stop.
Thank you, Carl. So we don't have any questions in queue at the moment. I think we may get a couple. It looks like there are a couple coming in, but in the interest of time, we will have to move to the next agenda item, and then we will take any questions that come in pertaining to hubs at the open Q&A, which will start in about 10 minutes. So I will turn it over now to Ezra and to Rebecca to talk about human rights. Again, if you have any questions about the hubs, feel free to just drop them in the chat. We will save them for the end, the open Q&A at the end. And then we also will be having an open Q&A quickly after this human rights update. So questions about either of those are more than welcome. Thanks. Ezra, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Elena. Hey, everyone, I'm Isra, I'm from Bahrain, and I have been on the board for about 5 years, and I'm currently in the capacity of vice chair and chair of the product and technology committee. Human rights as a theme is very near and dear to me as someone who is on the receiving end of a lot of targeted attacks while running a human rights organization for the last 18 years, hence my physical anonymity online and why I'm usually off video. One of the main reasons I had agreed to serve on the board is to ensure that people with similar risks are taken into consideration in everything that we do, so that when the foundation, when the communities, our platforms grow, we can do so in a meaningful way without leaving folks like me behind, as we often tend to be dismissed into the corners of the web where we have no voice or agency to protect those in similar situations. And this is especially important as we live in a world where widespread surveillance, censorship, and disinformation is slowly but surely becoming the norm. I'm sharing that context because I have been closely involved with the Foundation's work on human rights. I'm happy to share that on Tuesday, the team published a human rights impact assessment to understand whether and how Wikimedia projects, platforms, and activities might cause inadvertent human rights harms to Wikimedia stakeholders. Publishing this report is the most recent step the Foundation has taken to fulfill our commitment to respect, protect, and advance the human rights of those who use and contribute to Wikimedia projects and who are beloved members of our communities. I'll hand it over to Rebecca McKinnon, the Foundation's Vice President of Global Advocacy, who has been leading this challenging but critical and timely work. So Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ezra, and thank you so much for your leadership and the leadership of everyone else on the board who has really been pushing to ensure that the foundation respects and protects human rights and lives up to our commitments to everyone who wants to share knowledge freely across borders, and very grateful for your support. I'm sharing again the link to the Human Rights Impact Assessment here so that everyone has it at the top there. And I'm also going to share the PDF of the report as well for people who want to access that directly. So the Human Rights Impact Assessment, reflected in this report, was conducted by outside human rights specialists from a company called Article 1 Advisors. And it was commissioned by the Wikimedia Foundation in 2020 in order to understand, as Rod described, the human rights risks related to Wikimedia projects and to identify opportunities to address and mitigate those risks and to ensure that we're protecting people to the greatest extent possible. The report identified 5 key human rights risks relevant to the projects, including harmful content, harassment, government surveillance and censorship, risks to child rights, and limitations on knowledge equity. The foundation believes knowledge is a human right, as reflected in our human rights policy that the board approved in December. No online platform that claims to support human rights can neglect its fundamental responsibility to protect and respect human rights. And our responsibility, as the human rights policy has reinforced, includes due diligence and accountability to affected communities. And so the report, since it was submitted to the foundation in July 2020, the foundation has been working over the past couple of years to make significant advances in living up to its commitment, including developing the Universal Code of Conduct, investing in greater human rights expertise at the foundation, including the creation of a human rights team. Some of you will have met Cameron Ashraf and some of the other human rights fellows. Strengthening human rights resources and best practices available to the movement, helping volunteers protect themselves from threats related to censorship and surveillance. Approving a human rights policy, as I mentioned, which is committing the foundation to conducting ongoing human rights due diligence. And due diligence means conducting studies to understand what the threats are and how to address them, tracking and publicly reporting on our efforts to meet our commitments, using our influence with partners, the private sector and governments, to advance and uphold respect for human rights, and particularly as pertains volunteers and everyone else in the movement who interacts with the projects, and providing access to effective remedies when harms have occurred. So the foundation is committed to continuing due diligence efforts like this assessment to continue to understand what the risks are and to mitigate impacts also of disinformation on Wikimedia projects. And the trust and safety team and also the global advocacy team have been beefing up our resources on that. And so evaluating the recommendations in the report, which I invite all of you to take a look at, and meeting our broader human rights commitments is, of course, going to require working very closely with volunteers and affiliates. We invite you to participate in the Global Advocacy team's upcoming community conversation hours on July 28th at 2 different times at 12 o'clock and 2100 UTC. Those will be led by my colleague, Ricky Gaines, to hear about what we've learned through the recent community conversations on our human rights policy and to engage with us on the movement strategy and governance forum. And with that, I welcome questions.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks, Ezra. We have a couple of follow-up questions, one from the YouTube chat. The question is just about how the foundation's commitment to human rights affects the relationship between community members and the foundation. And when we asked for a little bit more specificity, the idea is, does the foundation's commitment to supporting human rights mean things like community members should be able to effectively participate in foundation governance, which this person believes we do relatively well. So I guess just a general question, how does our commitment to human rights as a foundation and a movement impact the relationship between the foundation and the communities?
That's a really great question, and I definitely encourage board members to jump in on that as well. I'm pasting in the chat the human rights policy as well that will help kind of describe the ways in which the foundation understands its commitments, and definitely the relationship is a lot of the focus has to do with the fact that different volunteers in different places may or may not experience risks from participating in the projects. And so it is the foundation's responsibility, of course, to help people understand what those are. If you're in a place where either a government or other powerful people may not like what's being posted, what you're doing to edit. So to help you understand the risks and help you protect yourself and to provide support. So that's certainly part of the relationship. Also making sure that we're having a conversation, right? So that we're really learning from the community about what the concerns are. And that the community is also holding the foundation accountable, which speaks to governance. And I see Shani is nodding, so she might have something to say. I do see somebody ask who will provide support to members, and I'll just jump in to answer that because I interpret that as a follow-up question. We have a human rights team. It's led by Cameron Ashraf, who's not here today, but there is an email called, I believe it's Talk to Human Rights, that you can email if you have specific concerns. There are also pages on Meta, the human rights page, and there's a page for the human rights team. I'll put those links in a minute so that we can make sure you know all the different channels for conversation. And you can also show up for the conversation hours, which we'll also post the information about in a moment.
And just to add to that, this will be an iterative effort. Some countries are safer today, and tomorrow it's taken over by military dictatorships. So the foundation will always attempt to resource, develop risk assessment and mitigation strategies to protect communities everywhere. But to do that effectively, it's so important to have your participation so that you can help articulate what those risks are as well when you see them. So that helping the foundation become increasingly aware of certain issues or risks that may not have come to the foundation's attention or to the human rights team's attention, for example. So we definitely recommend that you attend those meetings and participate whenever you can.
I'll just add something quick if we have time, Elena. Do we have time? If not, it's not. Yeah. Then first of all, I want to thank Rebecca and her team. The whole effort around human rights have been something that we've been at the Wikimedia Foundation working on for several years now, and the policy that was released earlier this year has been a milestone, an important one for making us more accountable and just thinking about it in a more strategic and organized way. I recommend to everyone, I think it's one of these issues that touch anyone, even if they don't think so. So go read the policy, because that's a beginning of understanding how we're looking at it. And I'll just mention that we're in a way, looking at it from two different angles. One, there are our projects online and how people who use the information online, so our users online all over the world, are encountering them, and how human rights issues may raise from that. So that's one portion of the work. And the other is the people who create the content, you volunteers, the community, or different communities around the world, and how participating in creating the knowledge is impacted by human rights. So we're trying in the policy to tackle these two different angles. And it's important, as Isra was saying, for the community to actually tell us some of your needs and some of not only challenges, but just tell us and be in contact with that team that is really looking to hear more from the community, so we can better support you in whatever you need. But the policy is the starting point. It's going to, in a sense, inform everything that the community, the Wikimedia Foundation will be doing in coming years. And it's also connected to other efforts at WMF, like parts of it connects to trust and safety, to other legal issues of, laws changes in different countries that may impact human rights. So it's a team that is working in collaborations with others, and always happy to hear from the people on the ground what you actually need. And if you have any special thoughts, do let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will transition now to just the open Q&A about any other topics or anything that we weren't able to get to earlier in the call. To kick that off, I do have one follow-up question for Carl, and then we can take any other questions that come here in the YouTube chat, in the Zoom chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand to ask a question live, please feel free to put your hand up in the chat. Carl, you talked in your update about the minimum piloting criteria, I believe was the term that you used. So I think that that's in reference to the basic criteria that an organization that wants to become a hub needs to meet in order to be considered for the pilot, right? The minimum criteria that they would need to be a pilot hub. So the question in the chat was just, you mentioned that this is being worked out currently, but the question in the chat was around this. What is it looking like the criteria that will be agreed upon will consist of for an organization to be able to become a pilot hub?
Yeah, so there is thank you very much for a question. There is a meta level debate regarding whether there should be such criteria at all that might block the development of the hub, because as the argument went during the events is that there are so many different contexts, and while some of the criteria might make a lot of sense in one, they do not necessarily make sense in another. So if there is a sufficient rationale why certain criteria should not be implemented in a context, then it should be accounted for. So that's kind of the principle of contextualization. The second part that was made clear is that maybe we should use the term of guidelines, that basically any hub that is going through a pilot should actually look out for these criteria as guidelines. That will improve the quality of the work and transparency of the work and different aspects of the work, and also will make it possible to create spaces for peer learning, peer sharing, working across the different regions and communities. So that's another aspect that was made clear. If you put these meta-level discussions on the side, then also we came to a certain agreement that there are criteria that people feel that are essential for the hubs. That means that 2/3 of the people participating in the poll over a weekend shared that a stated goal or clear goal purpose of a hub needs to be there. The public documentation needs to be there for transparency and peer learning. There needs to be a needs assessment. So actually a hub or a hub pilot is fulfilling the expectations and needs of the communities involved. And also there needs to be a clear plan. what is actually being done. And then also people voted for clear connection to the movement strategy implementation, so we want to see the alignment. So these are also the ones where actually majority of people feel that these actually make a lot of sense and probably should be used as criteria. So this is the current status of the conversation. And like I said, we are planning to do a kind of fuller report regarding all the discussions, including the ones on Meta, and propose the next guidelines that would integrate that feedback. Full stop.
Thank you so much for that context, Carl. So we have a question that was submitted ahead of time that I would like to take now that is not pertaining to the agenda items, but is a general question that is, I think, of urgency to that person who is asking the question. So that question is about the new Pages Patrol and articles for creation. The question is, what is the foundation doing to protect new Pages Patrol and articles for creation from system overload and AI bot generated articles spamming the system? And I can direct this to Shani to open the floor on this one.
Sure, I'll try to take it on. First, I will say that the board's role is to guide a foundation on high-level strategic decision-making with our global community and movement in general in mind. We are not involved in the day-to-day operations and not involved in particular workflows and decisions that are related to specific projects that are made by different communities. That said, I know that this issue is probably very urgent to whoever is asking. So even though it's not within the board's remit, I can say a few things from what I know. In this case, I believe the question pertains in particular to the English Wikipedia. I do know that there are concerns about the increasing backlog for patrolling new pages on English Wikipedia. And I understand that it can be difficult for editors working hard to moderate the content and handle all this inflow of information. It's important to note that the new Pages Patrol and articles for creation workflows are unique to English Wikipedia and are basically community developed, right? It's something that the community itself decided upon periodically with support from our product department, just like in the 2019 New Page Patrol project. From talking to the good people in the product department, I can say there is a desire to help ensure that specific projects maintain the ability to request changes as they see fit. I know it can be very hard to wait when an issue feels really urgent, but these types of requests are perfect for the community wishlist survey. And we encourage you to actually take the concerns there when it opens in January. I hope this answers, and we welcome any further feedback on that, but again, not related specifically to the board.
Thanks, Shani. So we have another question, a follow-up question related to human rights. So I would invite Rebecca or Ezra or anyone else who wants to chime in here on this one. There was a little bit of discussion in the chat about surveillance, and this person says that they agree that increased surveillance is to be taken very seriously, and are wondering how that translates to the Foundation's initiative to work on potentially self-hosted tools or maybe more secure tools, wondering if third parties like Zoom might be problematic in some contexts, and how we're kind of thinking about tools and surveillance and security on that going forward.
Rebecca, you want to take this one and then I can add?
Sure, and I welcome others as well. A few different things. The foundation is just in doing our due diligence around privacy. We are continuing to look at the threat of surveillance and both how to provide proactively volunteers with information about how to protect yourself from surveillance that could result in abuse of your rights. But also we are looking at continuously potential technical approaches to help. And there is due diligence going on right now, just examining some possible solutions in the future that the engineering department is continuously looking at. So that just to speak in general terms, given that there's no firm decisions at this time, but it's something that people on the technical side are looking at quite seriously, and that there are conversations about. The human rights team led by Cameron does point people to external tools that can help you be safer, and points to techniques as well to help you be safer. So that's another issue there. The global advocacy team is, of course, advocating against government surveillance practices and pushing for laws and accountability mechanisms that would rein in government practices and help people hold governments accountable for bad behavior. So because that is also in interest of the community. So there are a number of ways that we are trying to address the threats caused by surveillance, but I'm sure Ezra may have more to say, and there might be others as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, one thing that has been taken into consideration is a mixture of certain models. For example, some meetings require privacy-conscious tools, which can't be conducted, on places like Zoom or Meet, Google Meets. And these would, for example, could be on a self-hosted server on Jitsi. But for more major events, Wikimedia's online, for example, it has been difficult to handle for those types of services to handle the type of traffic and bandwidth requirements. So there have been certain limitations there, despite them being taken into consideration for us to accommodate as many people as possible securely. But there are also smaller teams and communities that do use end-to-end encrypted messaging when it comes to discussing specific incidents or having conversations that require a level of anonymity, for example. So this does happen. But yeah, this is definitely top of mind, and it's something that has been discussed also in the product and technology committee in terms of what we need to be investing in, what is feasible and could be long-term, more sustainable, but is also privacy conscious.
Thank you both very much for that. We have a few questions that have been asked and answered in the chat. So I will turn then to a pre-submitted question about grants. So I believe Veronica is still on the call. Veronica, you mentioned some changes around reporting requirements, moving to a trust-based system, giving a little more flexibility to grantees about what they choose to use in order to report their progress. This person is pointing to another change that I think was significant around board members of affiliates and their ability to serve on regional funds committees. So the question is, can current affiliate board members serve on the regional funds committees? And is that a change? And if so, what motivated that?
Yeah, thanks, Elena, and thanks to the person who asked the question. Again, coming back to the process has been an iterative process. We are learning as we implement and continue to be open to your feedback. So the regional fund committees have decided to allow current board members of affiliates to be eligible to participate. The committees strive to have diversity at different levels, as well as a range of expertise. And they did identify that having knowledge specific to affiliate board members would be a very helpful addition to advancing the new grant strategy. Again, we continue to learn. We will implement these changes as we go. Your feedback is very useful to us. We hope to strive for equitable distribution of funds, and any feedback that would lead us to that would be very helpful.
Thanks, Veronica. So we've just got another thought-provoking question, I think, around privacy in the chat here on the Zoom room. How do we protect people and give them tools needed while also not enabling sock puppetry and other on Wiki abuse? I think this is a critical tension that we've been talking about for many years in the movement and within the foundation. And then the context here, it's easier with old users willing to ID themselves to the foundation, but new users and people who would rather stay anonymous is something to think about. So how are we thinking about that tension as we're advancing in our human rights work and our privacy work?
Yeah, well, if I could jump in.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then Ezra, please. Well, this is why what we call due diligence, impact assessment, really examining the pros and cons, because as Alexei points out, there tend to be, there's never one perfect solution that's completely good for everybody and has no downsides. That's very rarely the case. And so we are exploring, for example, in the context of IP editing, the question of IP masking and all of those questions. What is the best way forward? There's an impact assessment that just both in terms of privacy, both in terms of human rights, protecting people's privacy on the one hand, preventing abuse on the other. How do you roll out a feature that's privacy enhancing, but also do it in a way that mitigates and holds accountable abuse? You have to do it thoughtfully. And so we are working to do our due diligence around those questions, because we recognize there are all kinds of complex implications for any step that's taken. But please go ahead, Ezra.
Thanks, Rebecca. No, that's exactly what I wanted to say. And there is no perfect solution, and there probably wouldn't be, and there'd be compromises in either case. But those are definitely top of mind and super valid concerns that have been discussed at the board level, within communities, and even with the product and tech committee, when it does collaborate with the trust and safety team, for example. It has been an ongoing collaboration, and there just have been a lot of back and forth about how to do this effectively without compromising the integrity of the data that we have.
Thank you so much for that. So let me just do a quick scan. I think we are fully caught up on the questions from the chat, which is great because we've only got about 7 minutes left on the call. So if it works for you, Shani, maybe we can move to the wrap up.
Please.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Again, the recording of this call will be available on the YouTube link where some of you are already watching. And it will be uploaded to Commons in the coming days. We're also going to post, as always, notes of the important points from this meeting and their translations on today's event meta page. So if you feel you missed anything, if there was anything said too quickly or too complex, and you want to go back and reread it in English or in another language, you will be able to do that. If you enjoyed today's call and want to automatically get the Zoom link sent to you anytime we have a call like this in the future, you can email askcac@wikimedia.org. Shani has just dropped that into the Zoom chat. If someone could drop that into the YouTube chat as well, that would be great. And we will add you to the list. That way you won't have to request the Zoom link. We just automatically send you reminders of the call with the link in there. You will also, as always, be able to email Ask Hack with any questions or feedback you have at any time. It's always being monitored and responded to, not just during these calls. So let me quickly pass it to Shani to do a wrap up, and we can do our poll like we always do at the end.
Yes. Thanks, Elena, for reminding everyone about the Ask CAC at wikimedia.org email. This is indeed something that is opened all year long, not just before our bi-monthly meetings, and you're welcome to ping us with any question that you feel stuck with, that you weren't able to progress with. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Before we wrap up, we have just one more thing that we want to request from you. And we will be running a short, very quick poll to see how you felt about today's call. Please take a moment to respond to this poll. This is helping us improve and making these conversations better suited to your needs. We'll take the poll now. You can also email your feedback to the askcac@wikimedia.org email. The links are now here in the Zoom room and also on YouTube posted. So let's take a moment to see your responses. Elena will then share so we can discuss it for a minute, and then I'll say the formal goodbyes.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, let's wait for a second. I think that we're getting some results here from Zoom. I do think that YouTube is slightly behind on getting the poll, because they're slightly behind on the stream itself. So let's wait just for another little bit, and then we can refresh as the rest of the results come in. Let's see, Emerald, it's hard for me to see from here. How many people do we have that have taken the survey so far, the poll?
We're at about 14.
At 14, okay. So results still coming in.
It's, I'll say in the meantime, it's really encouraging to see these numbers. We appreciate your participation, and if there are any requests or things that we haven't touched that you feel we can improve on, do let us know through the Ask CAC email. And I think with that, 2 minutes ahead of time, I will thank everyone for joining us. I want to give a special thank you to Elena, who has been working tirelessly to make this happen and to facilitate today's call. Thank you to all our staff members and Mariana, our CEO, for joining. Thank you to all the trustees for taking time from your busy schedules as volunteers to join us today. And mostly, thank you the community here in Zoom, on YouTube, and those who will be watching afterwards for joining us. We really, truly appreciate this opportunity to communicate with you. And we look forward to next time. Next time is going to be at Wikimania next month. And we're going to run a slightly different interactive session. It's going to be fun. So hope you join us. And we'll see you again in the fall for another conversation with trustees. So thank you all, and good day, good night, wherever you are.
Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.